Hey, I'm Elena, and this is Fluent English 10, and today we're going to talk about something very normal, very real, and, well, not very exciting at all. Chores. Yeah, chores. Those little things we do at home that somehow never really end, no matter how often we do them. So let me ask you something first, and be honest with yourself for a second. Do you like doing chores? Most people don't. I mean, who really does, right? But here's the thing, whether we like them or not, we all do chores every single day in one way or another. So today, I want to talk about chores in real life. Not in a textbook way, not like a lesson, but the way people actually talk about them when they're living their normal lives. Because if you live in a house or an apartment, yeah, chores are part of your day, whether you like it or not, and there's really no way around it. Now let's start simple. In English, we say, I do chores. That's it. Very basic, very common, something you hear all the time. You can also say, I have to do chores. And that little phrase, have to, is important because it means you don't really have a choice. I don't always want to do chores, honestly. Most days I don't, but I have to do them, and I'm pretty sure you feel the same way. Some people do chores every day without thinking too much about it, while others wait until the weekend and then try to do everything at once. Me? Well, I try to do a little every day, but if I'm being honest, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I look at the mess, take a deep breath, and think, I'll do it later. And yes, that's a very natural phrase too. I'll do it later. We say that a lot, especially when we're tired, busy, or just not in the mood. There's another way people say this, and you'll hear it all the time in real conversations. I put it off. To put something off means you delay it, you don't do it now, you plan to do it later, or maybe not at all. I put off doing chores during the week. I keep putting it off. Yeah, that one probably sounds familiar. Now, here's something interesting. When people talk about chores, they usually complain just a little, not too much, just enough to let you know how they feel. You might hear someone say, I still have chores to do, or I spent the whole morning doing chores. And notice something important here. They don't explain everything. They don't list every task. They just say chores because everyone already understands what that means. Now, let me ask you something. When do you usually do chores? In the morning, after work, or maybe on the weekend? Take a second and think about it. You can say, I do chores after work. I do chores on Saturdays, or I usually do chores in the evening. All of those sound completely normal. Now, another quick question. Do you live alone, with family, or maybe with roommates? Because trust me, that changes everything. If you live alone, you probably say, I do all the chores. But if you live with other people, you might say, we split the chores, which just means everyone does a part. I do the dishes, and they take out the trash. Simple, clear, and very real English. Now, small twist here. Some people are super organized and have a cleaning schedule. They know exactly what to clean and when. Yeah, that's not me. I don't really have a schedule. I usually clean when things start to look bad. And when they look really bad, I usually say, okay, I really need to clean. Have you ever said that? Yeah, me too. And if someone asks you, "What are you doing this afternoon?" you can simply say, "I have to do some chores." No details needed. That sentence is enough. So let's slow down for a second. So far, we've used some very real English, things people actually say in daily life, like, I do chores, I have to do chores, I put it off, I'll do it later, we split the chores, and I still have chores to do. These aren't grammar examples. They're life examples. You hear them at home, at work, and in normal conversations. Now, I want you to think about your own situation. Do you do chores every day or only on the weekend? And do you usually do them right away or do you put them off? Try to answer in English, just in your head. I usually do chores. I hate chores, but I try to keep things clean, but no pressure. This episode is just getting started. In the next part, we'll talk about specific daily chores, the ones you really can't avoid. But for now, just remember this. Chores are boring, but the English you use to talk about them is actually very useful and very real. The daily chores you can't avoid. All right, so now that we've talked about chores in general, let's get a little more specific because whether we like it or not, there are some chores we just can't escape. I'm talking about the daily ones, the small things that don't seem like a big deal but somehow always come back. For example, dishes. Yeah, dishes. At some point during the day, you eat something, you use a plate, a cup, a fork, and then later you look at the sink and think, oh, right, that. So in English, we usually say, I do the dishes, not wash the dishes, although you can say that. But most people say, do the dishes, especially in everyday conversation. I usually do the dishes after I eat because if I leave them there, they start to pile up. And once that happens, it suddenly feels like a much bigger job. And pile up is a great phrase, by the way, because it means things slowly become a mess. The dishes pile up. My laundry is piling up. Very real, very relatable. Now, some days I clean the kitchen right away, but other days, I don't. Sometimes I tell myself, I'll clean up later. And yes, clean up is another phrase people use all the time. I clean up after dinner. I clean up before going to bed. It just means you put things back where they belong and make the space look decent again. Not perfect, just decent. Let me ask you something. Do you clean up right away or do you leave it for later? Because a lot of people say they'll do it later, and then later never comes. Now, another daily chore most people deal with is making the bed. Some people do it every morning without thinking, like it's automatic, while others look at the bed and say, what's the point? I'm going to mess it up again tonight. If you want to talk about that in English, you can say, I make my bed every morning. Or, I don't usually make my bed. Both are completely normal things to say. I try to make my bed, especially if I'm working from home, because for some reason, it makes the room feel calmer. Like the day is already a little more organized. Now let's talk about tidying up. This one is interesting because tidy up doesn't mean deep cleaning. It just means picking things up and putting them back where they belong. I tidy up the living room. I tidy up before guests come over. Very common phrase, very useful. And if you're in a hurry, you might hear someone say, I do a quick tidy. That means you clean just enough so it doesn't look like a disaster. Now, here's a little reality check. Some days I do all these things without a problem, but other days I walk past the mess, look at it, and think, I'll deal with it later. And yes, deal with it is another phrase people use naturally. I'll deal with the dishes later. I'll deal with it this weekend. It doesn't mean you're happy about it. It just means you know it's waiting for you. So let's pause for a second. Think about your day. What daily chores do you usually do? Do you do the dishes every day? Do you make your bed? Do you tidy up? Or do things pile up? Try to answer in English, even if it's simple. I do the dishes at night. I clean up after dinner. I tidy up in the morning. That's more than enough. And remember, these are the kinds of things people talk about all the time, usually without even thinking about it. They're not fancy conversations, but they're real. And real English lives right there. We'll keep going in the next part and talk about weekly chores, the ones we love a little less, like laundry and taking out the trash. But for now, just notice how many of these phrases already fit into your daily life. Weekly chores and the ones we don't love. All right, so we've talked about chores in general, and then about the daily ones, the little things you deal with almost without thinking, like dishes or cleaning up. But now let's move on to a different category. The weekly chores, you know the ones. The chores you don't do every day, but when the time comes, you really feel them. Let's start with a classic. Laundry. Yeah? Laundry. In English, we usually say, I do the laundry. Not wash clothes, not clean clothes, just do the laundry. And laundry has a funny way of piling up without you noticing. One day you think, I still have clean clothes. And the next day you're standing in front of the closet thinking, okay, I really need to do laundry. If you want to say that in English, you can say, my laundry is piling up. I'm out of clean clothes. Very common, very real. Some people do laundry once a week, usually on the weekend, while others wait as long as possible and then do everything at once. Me? I usually say I'll do it on Saturday, and then Saturday comes, and somehow I'm busy all day. So I tell myself, I'll do it tomorrow. And yes, that's putting it off again. Another weekly chore that people talk about a lot is vacuuming. I vacuum the apartment. I need to vacuum. It's one of those chores that you don't notice until you really notice it. You look at the floor and think, wow, this place needs a vacuum. And if you have pets, forget it. You might also hear people say, I need to clean the floors. That can mean vacuuming, mopping, or both, depending on the situation. Now let's talk about a chore nobody really enjoys. Taking out the trash. In English, we say, I take out the trash. Very simple, very common. And this one is usually not optional, because at some point the trash smells, and when that happens, there's no more ignoring it. You might hear someone say, the trash needs to go out. Can you take out the trash? If you live with other people, this sentence probably sounds very familiar. Now, here's something interesting. When people talk about weekly chores, they often use phrases like, I need to catch up on chores. That means you haven't done them in a while, and now everything is waiting for you. I spent the whole afternoon catching up on chores. Not fun, but very real. Some people actually enjoy certain chores, believe it or not. They might say, I don't mind doing laundry. I actually like cleaning. I don't mind is a great phrase, by the way, because it means you don't love it, but you don't hate it either. And then there are chores people really dislike. You might hear, I hate folding laundry. I hate cleaning the bathroom. Totally normal things to say. Now let me ask you something. Which chore do you dislike the most? Laundry, vacuuming, taking out the trash? And which one do you not mind doing? Try to answer in English, just for yourself. I don't mind, I really don't like. That's already great practice. Now here's a little reality check. Most people don't do all their weekly chores in one day unless they really have to. They usually spread them out, or they do the minimum during the week and save everything for the weekend. You might hear someone say, I'll do it this weekend. I have a lot of chores this weekend. And when the weekend finally comes, well, sometimes chores get done, and sometimes they don't. And that's okay. The important thing here isn't being perfect. It's being able to talk about your real life in English. So take a second and think about your week. What chores do you usually do? Which ones do you avoid? Which ones always seem to pile up? Try to describe it in English, slowly, in your head. I do laundry on Sundays. I take out the trash every week. I hate vacuuming, but I do it anyway. That's real English. And in the next part, we'll talk about how chores fit into your routine overall. When you do them, how you talk about them casually, and how people usually wrap this kind of conversation up. But for now, just remember this. Weekly chores are annoying, sometimes exhausting, but the language you use to talk about them is something you'll hear and use all the time. How chores fit into your day. All right, so now we've talked about daily chores, weekly chores, the ones we don't mind so much, and the ones we really don't enjoy. But let's zoom out a little and look at the bigger picture. Because chores don't usually happen on their own. They fit into your day, somewhere between work, school, family, rest, and everything else going on in your life. For example, during the week, most people don't have a lot of energy for chores. They come home tired, maybe a little stressed, maybe hungry, and the last thing they want to do is clean. So you'll often hear people say things like, I'm too tired to do chores today. I'll deal with it later. And again, deal with it just means you know the chore is there. You're not ignoring it forever. You're just not ready to do it right now. Very human, very real. Some people like to do chores after work just to get them out of the way. They'll say, I like to get chores done early. I clean up before I relax. That phrase, get something done, is really useful because it means you complete a task and then you don't have to think about it anymore. Other people are the opposite. They finish work, sit down, and say, I'll do chores later, and later turns into tomorrow. And that's okay too. A lot of people save most of their chores for the weekend. You might hear someone say, I usually do chores on Sundays. My weekends are mostly chores. Not very exciting, but very honest. Now here's something interesting. When people talk casually about their week, chores often show up without much detail. Someone might say, I had a busy week, just work and chores. I didn't do much, just chores and errands. By the way, errands is another word you'll hear a lot. It means small tasks outside the house, like going to the store or the bank. I ran some errands this morning. Very common, very natural. Now let me ask you something. When do you usually do chores? During the week? On the weekend? A little every day? And how do you feel about them? Do you like to get them done quickly, or do you take your time? Try to answer in English, slowly, in your head. I usually do chores. I try to clean. I don't always have time, so that's already good practice. Here's another phrase people use a lot when talking about chores and routines. I try to keep things tidy. Tidy doesn't mean perfect. It just means clean enough to feel comfortable. I try to keep my place tidy during the week. That sentence alone sounds very natural and very fluent. Now, sometimes things don't go as planned. Life gets busy, chores don't get done, and suddenly everything feels a bit overwhelming. That's when people say, everything's a mess. My place is a disaster. They're not always true, but they express how someone feels in that moment. And usually, right after that comes this sentence, I really need to clean. We've all said it. Now let's bring everything together. Chores aren't exciting. They're not something we usually enjoy talking about, but they're a big part of daily life. And because of that, the language around chores comes up all the time. At work, with friends, with family, in small conversations. So being able to say simple things like, I have to do chores. I'll do it later. I'm too tired today. I'll clean this weekend. That's real communication. That's English you'll actually use. So before we move on, take one last moment. Think about your typical week. When do you do chores? Which ones do you avoid? Which ones do you try to get done quickly? Try to describe it in your mind, in English, just like you would tell a friend. No pressure, no perfection, just real life. And that's exactly what this episode is about. All right, that's it for today. Now you know how to talk about chores in simple, real English, the kind people actually use in daily life. Remember, you don't need big words or perfect sentences. You just need to talk about what you really do. So next time you're doing chores, try to describe them in English, even if it's just in your head. Little by little, it all adds up. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.